Here's a tip. I do not type to my AIs. I exclusively talk to them all. It makes an incredible difference with the way that you interact with an AI. It removes the need to do prompt engineering. It's incredibly powerful.
Rob, welcome to the show.
Hey, Aydin, good to see you. Good to be on the show.
Very excited to do this. I mean, you are like, when I think about people who are all in on AI and we're all in on AI before everybody else, you're definitely part of the list. So would love to just start, maybe tell us like a little bit about like who you are, a little bit about your background and what you spend your time doing these days and your current company.
I've been in tech my entire life, longer than I'm going to admit on the call, and usually been working in software. So I I started off in IT management, but very quickly moved into software and worked with a lot of different SaaS software providers in lots of different industries. Spent a long time in live entertainment, and then I actually left. I left about 3 years ago, just under 3 years ago, to start up a product management consultancy. So I was a chief product officer and always really fascinated by the kind of latest technology, but also how that technology is applied to people. So, as product, you're kind of there, you're the interface between the tech and the user. And so that interface has always really excited me. And that's the intersection of technology I like to be on. I left to start up a consultancy. I was going to be a product management consultancy. Meanwhile, in the background, I'd been kind of keeping this really close eye on what was happening with AI and machine learning and, all the sort of traditional AI tools. And I'd actually been keeping an eye on the new generative models that were coming out. So I'd sort of been watching the progress of OpenAI, and I'd seen GPT-3, which had come out kind of probably 6 months maybe before I left. And I'd, been quite impressed. So I had this view that, there was something going on there. What was crazy is that the week that I left to start up my consultancy, ChatGPT was released. Literally like 3 days after I left the business. I'm from the UK originally. I was living in Canada, still live in Canada. And I was thinking to myself, this could be it. I've been kind of waiting for a long time to see something that would really move the needle. I spent like a week not doing anything to do with the new consultancy, just playing with ChatGPT. And I walked in, I remember walking to the lounge and saying to my wife, I'm going to start an AI consultancy. And like, she was kind of like, didn't even know what that meant. AI at the time was something that was very much buried within the background of software and tools. It wasn't accessible. It wasn't approachable. It wasn't affordable. And so I sat her down and showed her ChatGPT and what it was doing and got consent to risk everything. And so literally like the week after ChatGPT was released, I set up a consultancy, and that's what I've been doing ever since. And I've been taking my kind of 25 years of C-level experience in business, and then this understanding of the technology and this passion for AI, and really helping companies to adopt and utilize and use these tools. So I primarily pretty much 90% focused on Gen AI. And so that's been an incredible roller coaster. Throughout that journey of the last sort of 3 years, I've set up a couple of startups, and I have built 2 or 3 different tools using AI. More recently, a lot of the work I do in organizations is helping them to build out tools. But also there's a fair proportion of not building out tools and just bringing people up and helping them understand what this technology is, what it's capable of. Because there's a lot of misinformation out there, what it's not capable of. There's also a lot of misinformation over there, and really just helping them drive success and value through AI.
The reason, Rob, I'm very excited about this is C-level experience, worked at a bunch of businesses in a chief product officer role, startups and every big companies, everything in between. And then, like you said, for a number of years, you've now actually been doing the real thing, helping organizations apply this AI stuff in their company and get, and having a sense for what's real, what delivers value, what doesn't. And so, yeah, your perspective is going to be super awesome. And so I thought for today that we would try a little bit of a different experiment in that we're going to start right away with the demos. And then we have a few lined up today. So we're going to do a demo, and then we're going to talk about the implications and what it means. and then move on like that. And so we'll see. I think people are really going to like this new format, and you're going to be the first guest to do this with us. So I'm excited. The first thing that you're going to show us is an actual physical device, right?
Yes, yes. The first thing I'd like to talk about a little bit is this. So this is called Limitless, and so it's a pendant. So I was wearing Google Glass on day one. I had the Claude when the Claude came out. I didn't go for the Humane pin, but Limitless is the first kind of AI pin I got really excited about.
And this is just limitless.ai, right?
Yeah, Limitless.ai. So literally it just clips on. You just pin it on wherever you go. It's a magnet on either side. It comes with a little necklace as well. You can put it on. And all it is it's a reasonably good beamforming, like I think it's 5 or 6 microphone array. So all it's doing is listening. And so it's listening as long as you've got it on 24/7 if you want, all the day. The battery life is pretty good. So if you're using it kind of 8 hours a day, it will last a couple of days on a charge. It has a little stand that you put it in. So pretty much like our watches and everything these days, when you're not wearing it, you just put it on. And the idea is that you wear it all the time. I'm still in negotiation with my wife about wearing it all the time, but it's interesting because it's a couple of things. On one hand, it is useful for business. So it's great. You can have it on if you're in an in-person meeting, and, kind of like having fellow walking around with you all the time. Like you have this ability for it to listen in on what you're saying. And then it does some of the sort of standard stuff, creates a transcription that it breaks into summaries, that it breaks into it doesn't really do chapters, but it like does subjects throughout the day. All of this falls into an app on your phone, and it's kind of like a life log. So we'll see if this works. Yeah. So it's kind of like a life log. So it's throughout the day, and all of these can be kind of tapped and opened up, and it's showing all the different things that have happened. And then that's a timeline. So it goes from 9 a.m. or whenever you start recording.
The chapters and things and the timeline, is this all based on listening and conversation?
Yeah. So it's purely listening. It does do voice recognition. So after a while, it starts matching people, and you say who people are. But yeah, literally, it's just listening.
So if you've talked to a person before and it just voice fingerprints them, and the next time you meet with that person, it'll just automatically know who it is.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So it knows who my close friends are, who my wife is, who some of my
That's super
friends
interesting. Like, just a fun aside, like we have that at Fellow too, but it is very permission oriented. So the other party has to agree to a voice fingerprint and so on and so forth. It's interesting how these things are now. So, I mean, keep going. So now you have this timeline.
So now you have this timeline. Yeah. Now what's really interesting is, and this is where the sort of power comes in, is then you can set the AI tasks, and it can run those tasks daily. So at the end of every day, you can ask the AI to go through the last day's transcript and then produce you a comment, a little report, whatever it is that you want. But what I found fascinating is I don't really use Limitless for business as much. Like I have Fellow, I use that. That's great. That keeps my actions, etc. What Limitless I focus more on is the way that you behave around people. So I have 3 automations that it runs every day. One of them is, what's the one thing that I could do to be a better person based on what's happened today and how I've behaved? The other is, who are all the people that I've met today? And what is their story? Because I'm really bad with names. And the third thing is, what have I committed to today that I should remember? And so then every evening I get this little ping email and on the phone, and I have this report with, I might add some really scathing feedback on, me being a better person. So for example, I will pick one from the other day. Here's one concrete thing you could do to be a better person in every dimension of your life, personal, work, and family based on your recent conversations. Concrete action. I'm going to be vulnerable here. Practice more active listening and empathetic validation in your interactions. Across your conversations, you do a good job of engaging, offering advice, and sharing your perspective. However, you often move quickly to solutions, opinions, or your own experiences, sometimes missing opportunities to pause, fully acknowledge the other person's feelings, or ask deeper follow-up questions. Now, this goes on because what it then does is it gives you examples with names of when you did it and what happened. And some of them have been really quite emotional for me because I've kind of gone and apologized to people. It's called me out once when a friend of mine, we hadn't caught up in a long time, and it made the point that I had sat there on the call and talked about me and what I was doing for pretty much the whole call and not really asked her what she was doing or how things were. And I had to call her up after and say, I'm really sorry. I completely dominated our call today. Didn't mean to at all. But at the time, I didn't really perceive that was what was happening because I was just thinking, oh, I'm excited. She's excited. We're having a chat. We haven't caught up in ages. So it's really, really good, really clever, constructive, pointed feedback. And I find it incredibly valuable.
These are prompts that you've come up with. Are these defaults that maybe Limitless encourages?
Yeah, so they have a set of default prompts. That actually is one of the default prompts that they give you. And then you can create your own and schedule them yourself. So like, again, just really, one of the things I find really useful about AI or really useful about, or a good tip on how to use it, I will try and create these boxed areas of accountability for each AI you use. So the fact that this is my mentor, my personal mentor, means I can just be really clear. I can build a relationship with it. I can prompt it well and say, right, you're the mentor over here, fellow. You're the work buddy that helps me in my meetings. Over here, I have a ChatGPT AI that I use that's my kind of day to day that just sits on all the time on voice mode on my computer. So they give you a set of test prompts of things you can use. But the ones I've created are still very much about personal growth. You can go back in, just ask it any question. So, it will read back through all the previous transcripts, etc. Again, some people use it for that. I tend to find it's really just about personal development for me. It does actually as well have a full open API. So you can go on the website, get the API, get onto the device, and then put it into whatever like app you want to use and however you want to use it, which is quite interesting. It does raise some privacy concerns. I was talking to the CEO actually of Limitless a while ago, and it's something he said really struck me, which is once you explain what it's for and what you're using it for, then a lot of the issue tends to fall away. It's a personal development device, and I've shown people the prompts and they are like, oh yeah, by all means go for it. That's really clever.
This is the thing I was going to ask you about, is that, you walk into a meeting or you walk into you're using this all the time. So it could be a social gathering. If you're hypothetically, if you're grabbing beer with friends, you have it on all the time, right?
Yeah, I have to tell people, I've told everyone, so all of my friends know, none of them have said to turn it off. Even if I'm talking at a convention or something, I will say on stage, I've got this on, be aware. And if anyone comes up to me, I will, I'll make the point. So yeah, it's a reflection on where we're headed though. So I used to wear a device called the narrative clip, which was a little beautiful device, a little camera. Used to take a picture every 30 seconds. And then you would get these beautiful time lapses of my wedding and of holidays and all that sort of thing. And again, once I explained it to people that yes, it's taking a picture of you every 30 seconds, but it's a grainy picture and it's kind of, it's not really going to do anything bad. But the purpose of it is X, Y, Z. Then people were okay with that. And I'm finding more and more and more that people are okay. And I was on a InfoSec podcast the other week and we had a big conversation about it, but the people are okay with some of these concepts. Privacy is a lot less of a concern these days in terms of general populace walking around, like taking photos, etc. Everyone's got their phones out all the time. They're taking pictures. Again, I think it comes back to the intent, but I can't see society becoming more enclosed and more private. I can only see things opening up more and more and more as time goes on.
How do you think about, if you have this and it's a conversation, you're grabbing some beers with some friends, and you're talking about all sorts of things that maybe you don't want one day to become public, as an example. How do you think about that? I mean, all sorts of things are now being put on the record. Have you thought about that kind of stuff? I mean, today Limitless has not been hacked. I'm sure they have very good security, but some of the even password management companies have been hacked in the past, right? And so where there becomes a lot of valuable information, and if it's recorded, that could be possible. And sometimes bad actors can, use this stuff in nefarious ways. So
I mean, turning it off is just a case of holding the button in for a second. So it's really easy to turn it off. And if someone wants me to, or depending on what's going on at the time, or depending on the conversation, then I will turn it off. I wouldn't wear it into a highly confidential meeting or a client meeting again, unless there was a reason. But what's fascinating is that where we're headed into a world where I believe into a world where AI assistants and AI assistance is a common thing, then the idea of these tools, if you want to call them that, these assistants listening in on everything that's going on, the more context that they have, the better. It feels like it's going to be the norm. Like I used to have to explain to people what was happening when I had a fellow or whatever call recorder I was using right at the start on the call. I would, people would be like, what? I don't understand. How is what? Oh. Now it's, I was on a call yesterday. There were 6 different call recorders on the call. So we're moving into a world where the value of the AI's understanding more about us is starting to be greater than the risk of an individual giving up that privacy, I feel. Now, I'm on a podcast now, so someone will hear that and prove me wrong by doing something nefarious, but that's how I feel. That's where I feel we're headed.
it's interesting. So both of these things can be taken one way or another. And I feel like there will be companies that take one stance and, other companies that take another stance. A dystopian way to look at it is, it's a surveillance state. If it comes out, for now, as long as if it comes out of your mouth, it's basically recorded, and this is kind of where we're going, and that's one worldview. And there's another worldview where, you have AIs that are just there to assist you, and we're going to figure this out. So it's interesting. Like now there are companies where even service folks that come into, say it's a plumber or electrician, and they come to your house, they now have recording devices on them too, because they want to get coaching on their customer interactions. And so I think a lot of people don't know that, but that's a thing. There's this idea that like everything is going to be, and I don't know what the implications for society are to a certain extent, but it does seem like this is where we're going. And as long as the AIs are under our control, I guess it's fine.
Or maybe not. Like maybe as soon as they're not under our control, it's fine. Because for me, the risk is not the AI doing something bad with this stuff. The risk is, one of these companies deciding they're going to sell this information. And so, I actually think once the people are out of the way, then you may be in a better situation almost, like, which is an interesting way to view it. But like 9 times out of 10, I think the challenges we have are the organizations and the people around this technology rather than the technology itself. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see where it heads.
One question is, this company started with, are they the ones that also have an app and it records your entire screen and takes screenshots and that kind of stuff too?
Rewind. So with the Limitless subscription, you get Rewind as well. And so what that does, which is really fascinating, is it just takes a still of your screen every second. And then it does the same sort of thing. So it will keep them for a certain amount of time, but then it will run those past a language model as well, interpret what's on there, and kind of let you know what you're doing. And so with that, what you can do is, again, the same with Limitless. You can go back and say, what did so-and-so say on the 8th of September? You can go back and say, when was I typing in Word? When did I write this report? And it will spin back through these images, find that report, and can tell you what you typed.
And have you used that as well?
Yeah. So I have that as well.
What is your biggest takeaway or aha moment or useful thing that you get out of that and having your screen captured? And
there's a movement called quantified self that probably is almost irrelevant now because most things are quantified. But I've been, I did a talk on it years and years and years ago when I was pulling a load of data and having to hack things and do it myself. So one of the tools that came out of that was a tool called Rescue Time. And Rescue Time is a little bit similar to Rewind, and there's a link. And what rescue time does is just tracks all the apps you use. You categorize which ones are productive and non-productive, and then it just gives you a view of how productive you've been or not. With Rewind, it's the same. For me, it's the same kind of thing. I haven't yet found myself using it as much to kind of dive back in and say, when did I write this email? I had once actually, and it was quite good. But what I do find is interesting is it will just show you what you've been doing throughout the day, which often can help you understand maybe how you went off task, or it can just help you understand when you're having a really productive day, was there a pattern there that you want to replicate? All of this is about more data, and the more data that these tools have, the more valuable and powerful they are. And the more data, the more risk. With all of these sorts of tools, you can say, don't track this app or that app, don't track this site or that site, and things like that. But yeah, I mean, again, it feels like there's something coming. Maybe it's Johnny Ive and Sam Altman's startup, but it feels like there's something coming that is this, with a camera, with a GPS. And so you start to get a view of who, where, what. If you put to one side the dystopian sci-fi vision, the data and the meaning that could bring to you if it was put through an AI is pretty life-changing, I think.
It's very interesting. And again, like there are these two worlds, and it depends on like which version of reality you subscribe to in this case. But it's almost like it's again, in a dystopian world, you have this one company that is going to see everything and hear everything everywhere all at once. And that's a very enormous position of power. If, this is an evil company or the AI takes over one day or something like this, it's almost like the Eye of Sauron to a certain extent, right? This is one world. But I think one world that would maybe change that is, as long as there's multiple players, as long as there's like healthy competition and there isn't any one company, and there's going to be different AIs that are really good at different things. As long as that is the world, and it's not like any one organization that has access to all of the data from everything. I mean, that's a world that I would be more excited about versus just one company having it. And so, but yeah, we'll see where all this stuff goes. There's a lot of benefit that comes from it for sure.
Yes, yeah, and it's difficult not to talk that far ahead without verging on sci-fi. But at a certain point, if we really do hit AGI and superintelligence, which again, I'm not hearing anyone in the field say we're not going to. And so once we understand that means that everyone who has any real view on this is saying that there will be intelligences out there based on silicon that are more intelligent, more powerful than all of the people on the planet put together. When you get to that level, I think training starts to break down. And actually, my view is that you will start to it will be less about the companies. I know that this sounds really strange, but Sam Altman said something once, and I thought I know what he means. He said, this is the last hard problem I'll ever have to solve. Because there's a certain point, I think, at which these intelligences will say, this doesn't work unless no one gets the data. And at that point, there is the potential that they will be able to influence or potentially change the models that we use. And so you can imagine a situation where there is just one thing, there's a governmental or a planetary artificial intelligence. There's no underlying data that anyone can see or use. And so it kind of becomes its own entity, which again, you lose a lot of people when you talk about things like this. But there's, if you track it through, there's almost this through line to saying, where does this end up? And it doesn't feel like it ends up with Microsoft and OpenAI and Google in charge of these things that are orders of magnitude more intelligent than everyone in their organization. That just doesn't sound logical to me.
It's an interesting place. I think no one company is perfect. There will be competition and hopefully, and the governments will reinforce that. So the one thing I will say, just to kind of conclude on this chapter and before we move to the next demo, which I'm also very excited about, is that the things that you said, I think, are true in that in the beginning, people were much more privacy conscious. And I do see that window is shifting. Like even in the AI note taker example that you said, it used to be weird if a bot joined your call. now people are okay with that, and we're moving on to the next stage. And so, and again, like you said, people have digital cameras. People are taking pictures all the time. There are cameras in the streets. You go to London or you go to New York or in China, there's cameras everywhere. And so it's not like these things don't already exist in some way, shape, or form. And it's going to be a slow progression, right? And over the course of time. So all this to say is, like, this is the trend. This is where things seem to be going.
Yes. I'm reminded of a conversation I had with my grandma once, where she talked about how when she was a child, she used to really, or young, she used to really enjoy going into the local supermarket, and everyone knew your name. Everyone knew what you wanted. They would just pull the stuff out and put it on the counter in front of you. And she was talking about how impersonal things were nowadays. And then on the other side, we've just been having a conversation about web privacy and about how my wife was really frustrated with the way that all these bots are trying to track what you're doing. And there was this kind of parallel between these two things, that you can't have that personalized, friendly service without giving away information to that person. So back then, that grocer knew everything about my grandma. And right now, what we went through, I think, is a period of trying to pull everything back. But then you end up with this very impersonal world where no one really knows what you are. Websites serve you the wrong things. And so it's a balance. You can pick one or the other, but it's very difficult to get both, which I think is a really interesting way of looking at it.
By the way, the reason I think this stuff matters, and it's good that we're talking about it, is for all the listeners, like, this is a trend that's happening. Again, the electrician that came to your house the other day might have been recording the whole time and you wouldn't have even known. This is just a trend. And then two, it's just from a product design perspective, right? These LLMs are useful. They get infinitely more useful the more context they have. And, there's now the saying context is king, and it really means a lot. And so, great discussion. Let's also talk about and shift gears to talk about the next thing that you were going to show us. I think we're gonna go through Claude Code, right?
So one of the things that I think, and it's really interesting, this one of the things that I think people are starting more now to talk about is using AI for coding. But it still feels like there is this view that if you're in engineering, or if you're a developer, or if you work in a tech company, then you can use AI now to write software. And I've been talking for quite a while about the kind of inverse of that whilst there is a perception that this is an acceleration of software for software companies, what it also does is it lowers massively the barrier to entry for building software. And so things that you would never have thought you would write some software for, you can now write software for. And for me, this was absolutely kind of proven when Anthropic released Claude Code. And so I think it's really important to qualify what I mean by Claude Code. Claude is an LLM. And a lot of people, when I say about Claude Code, they're like, oh yeah, I've used Claude to write code. Claude Code is a specific tool, a command line tool that allows you to create software, but it's an agentic tool. So rather than Claude, where you're just saying, write me some code and then having to do stuff with it, Claude Code will spin up multiple little AIs. It will browse the web. It will check stuff out. It will build your code for you. It will download all the tools you need, so you don't have to do a thing. And so I've been using Claude Code heavily now in my work and in my personal life. And what I'm finding is that it is like I have a team of developers sat next to me, but they are a team of developers who are really happy doing anything. And so if I want to build out a PowerPoint presentation, I may choose instead to create an application now. If I want to present some figures from Excel and do a bunch of charts, I can get Claude Code to build me an interactive dashboard. And so that's absolutely changed the game for me. And I find myself now almost, and it's great fun, and I find myself now almost just building code whenever I would normally download an app. And so, for example, the other day, I was looking around to try and find a task management app just to keep track of daily habits. And I had a look at a few and was looking through the App Store, and they were like all pretty cheap, $9.99 and whatever. And then I thought, oh, actually, I'll build one. And so I just spun up Claude Code and set Claude off. And then the nice thing is it's kind of whirring away while you're doing other stuff. And then you occasionally look back and talk to it. So I want to show you a little bit about what that looks like.
Would love to see it. It's interesting. So as you pull that up, how does this differ with? So there's this term vibe coding. It's, I think, coined by Andrei Karpathy, who's one of the OpenAI co-founders. And so it's basically just talking to an LLM like it's a human and getting it to code things. And then there's tools like Replit, Bolt, Lovable that are making waves. So how is Claude Code different from those kinds of tools?
It isn't technically any different. It's just, I would say, by far the best tool I have found for vibe coding. So I've yet to find anything that is on a par with Claude Code. OpenAI just released Codex, which is another one, which is a great tool. There is GitHub Copilot. There's all these things. So the first thing is, I think it's by far the best tool I've seen. The second thing is it's almost been designed from the ground up to be used by someone who doesn't understand coding. So this is Claude Code, and Claude Code is, as you can see, is a command line interface. And so I'm using here my desktop, just something, a folder on my computer, on my Mac. A lot of the apps that I'm building are for me personally, so I don't need to host them or anything like that. I just want something that's running locally. However, it is interesting that it will go as far as installing servers. So the other day, it installed a free version of Postgres, set up a database on my Mac. And so now all my different little personal use things are running off Postgres. And so it configured and set up all of that.
So Rob, do you have to install something to get Claude Code?
Yeah, so it literally is just a command line to install it. And so on the Claude website, it gives you the instructions. It takes about 30 seconds, like, a minute to install. So really, really quick. And the app itself, Claude Code itself, is free. However, you use and it connects to the Claude app and then the Claude API. And so with the Claude app, you'll get a certain amount of usage, but it's very limited with just a Claude account. And if you go up to like the max account Claude, you get quite a lot of usage. And then if you use up all your usage, it will flip over to the API and then just use on a sort of pay-as-you-go basis. That's a paradigm, I think, because what it means is you can actually ask Claude how much it has cost to do something. And so it feels like you are hiring a developer rather than using a tool. But the amount it costs is kind of pennies, or cents. It's really small. You might end up spending like $5 or $6 on something that will save you hours and hours in a day. So what I've done here is I've put a sample database, Excel sheet, in this folder. So I have a folder called demo, and inside it, I've got a spreadsheet, an employee spreadsheet. And so what I'm going to just kick off, and then I'll show you some other things, is I'm going to kick off Claude just building me a dashboard around this particular spreadsheet.
This is really cool because, again, so this is an actual spreadsheet file on your computer. It's not like a Google Sheets. It's a Microsoft Excel file.
Microsoft Excel file, just literally in the folder.
Yeah, so this is an example of a real agentic experience on your computer. Obviously, it does use the internet to make some calls and things, but actually manipulating information, reading information from your desktop. I feel like that could be the theme of today, is things working on your desktop. We talked about the rewind, and now we're talking about Claude Code. It's very cool.
Now, another interesting thing here is so here's a tip. I don't know if you've done this a lot, but I do not type to my AIs. So I exclusively talk to them all. And I find it makes an incredible difference with the way that you interact with an AI. It removes the need to do prompt engineering. It's incredibly powerful. And funnily enough, because we're on the call, the webinar has access to my microphone, so I can't dictate. But one of the really interesting things is I can sit here normally and I will talk to Claude Code for like 3 or 4 minutes, give it all the context. This is what I'm looking for. I want this and that and the other, and and then I will just kick it off and it will start doing stuff. Now you see, this is a good example of agentic work here. What it's straight away done is, I can't read that Excel file natively. So, and I'm not going to be able to read it programmatically. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to install a bunch of tools, some dependencies for those tools. And then I'm going to write myself a little script, a Python script, and the Python script will then convert the Excel file into JSON. So already this is a great example of agentic work. It's gone off, found the right tools, installed them, and then gone and converted the file. And now it's starting to create the dashboard. So, already kind of far beyond what you could get with like a native tool like Claude or ChatGPT if you were asking them to write you some code.
As I'm watching this for anyone who is just listening in, I mean, it's amazing. Like, you can kind of see the work that Claude Code is doing, and there's comments. So it's actually saying, now I'll create the interactive dashboard HTML file, and it just goes through the process. And it's crazy. Like, it can know that it needs to install other programs and dependencies in order to be able to do the task that it wants. I mean, this is very much like a full-blown developer doing something in the background.
Yeah, and it's just written a 606 line file there. Now it's at a good point where it's cleaning up its temporary files. You can see again, it creates this little list for itself of what it's going to do. And so you can see it's gone through all of that list now. It's just finishing off. I love the little prompts. Every little prompt it gives you as to what it's doing has a different kind of name. So here we have it. It's created a dashboard.html and it's converted the employee data file.
That was pretty quick.
Yeah. So now I'll ask it to, so it's asking me to open the dashboard.html, but I'll say, could you open it for me? Because I don't know where it is. I do know I could go into the folder, but it will open it for me. And the other thing is, every time it does anything, you can choose whether you want to allow it to do that once, whether you want to auto approve from now on. And it does that for every kind of command. So you can say, for example, that it's okay to open files, but it's not okay to commit to a repository unless it gets your approval. Okay, so here is this is great. So here is our employee analytics dashboard. So first thing that's happened is we have an error. This is where it's really interesting, because any non-developer coming into this is then going to get stuck. Like, okay, it didn't work. But the great thing is, all you do literally is take the error, paste the error back in, and then Claude will figure it out. And I have yet to have to figure out what's going wrong. Every single time, I just paste the error back in and it figures the answer out. Now, sometimes it will do things and you'll think to yourself, do I want it to do that? Like right now, what it's doing is it's decided to take that file and put it inside the actual HTML because browsers block local file access. And if you're not sure that it's doing the right thing, you can just hit escape and stop it mid-flow, and you can ask it a question. So, is this the right way to go if I want to add more files later? And so again, you can use English language and just ask it the right questions, and then it will come back and say, no, we need to do a different thing here. So here what it's done is said, okay, let me set up a better solution. I'm going to create a little local web server that's then going to connect that file and push it into the HTML page. And so again, I don't need to understand what it's doing. I just need to trust that it's doing the right thing. Again, this is all just local on my device. And then I just need to let it know what's happening. I was having a conversation the other day with an architect who was saying, yeah, this is great, Rob, but how would it ever security proof this? How would it ever get to a point where if you're going to put any important data in there, how would you get to the point where this could be hosted or it could just be best practice security? And I said, well, let's ask Claude. So I went in and said, I'm a bit concerned about the security. Could you just review the security for me and tell me what you think is right or wrong? And it created a 4-page document, went through all the potential issues, suggested ways to fix it. Once it had done that, I passed it to the architect who said, yeah, okay, that's actually this is a really good approach. And I just said to Claude, okay, do that. And then it went in again and rebuilt all of that functionality. But at any one time, I have a bunch of these little things running. So I'm working in parallel on 3 or 4 little things here, all in Claude Code. And some of them are in different stages of development. So I have this one that we're building right now. This is my little task tracker I was talking about. So I'm a gamer. So I created my task tracker based on a game called Candy Box. I go in and tick all my things off every day that I've done or not. It gives me XP, it powers me up, and I can walk around a map and explore and all that sort of thing. I also have a online game that I've created for, again, a personal project. I have 121 people playing it. It's a puzzle game with loads of different puzzles. It asks you, to answer the questions. There's leaderboards and all that sort of thing. Again, all
That's amazing. You have 120 people playing it. That's
yeah,
awesome.
yeah. And it's been up for about 8 weeks. So yeah, already. And then the final thing I suppose to mention is that what I'm using it for heavily is actually going in and prototyping with my development team. So they will give me access to the repo. I don't know what that is or how it works, to be perfectly honest. I've worked in tech for a long time, and I've managed development teams at a very high level, but I've never been on the ground. And so what I do now is I will go in, ask Claude to understand the code. Claude will explain what's happening, and they will create me my own little section, and I will have Claude go into that section. We call it Claude's playground, and I will just prototype out ideas, solutions, things that I would like to see. And then the development team will go in and take that as inspiration, and they will then build that in the way they want to build it. Here's our dashboard, all taken with live data. And you look at this is all dummy data, just a dummy employee file. And you look at this and you think how long it would take you to build this in Excel. This is hours of work, and we did it in minutes.
Yeah, this is incredible. I mean, I look at this, it's got the charts, it's got the filters, it allows you to upload other files into it. The reality is in most cases you wouldn't do this work because it would take too long. And so now, if you did this work, would it benefit your project? It would benefit them tremendously. It just takes too long. But now that it doesn't take too long, you can do this for everything.
And that's exactly the point. It's exactly that. It just all of a sudden lowers the barrier. And so things that you would never even consider. I mean, who would have ever think, oh, I'm going to create a little role-playing game task tracker for every day just to keep track of the things I do? You wouldn't. If you wanted to, you'd write on a piece of paper or you'd download an app. Who would have built their own custom dashboard? And the other thing being that, already this is now extensible, so I can choose and upload another file, but I can go in and just ask it to tweak things. I mean, it's, now that it's here, I can say, okay, this is great. Actually, what I want are some tabs across the top, and I want to add this and that and the other. And again, just takes a few seconds, does the work, and puts it out there. And at any point, we can go in and see how much this has cost. So that cost me. Oh, okay, so far it's just using my inbuilt credits, so it hasn't cost me a penny. Whereas it'll come up and it'll say, "Oh, that was 52 cents." And so you've got a really clear idea of how much the development work is costing you, but it's costing you an absolute fraction, and you're able to do things you'd never consider doing.
Thank you for showing this. I mean, it's amazing. Like I've played with the online tools as well, some of the platforms we talked about, but this is unlike anything that I've played with before as well. It runs on your computer, it has access to your files. I love how there's a human in the loop element. So at certain points it pauses as it asks you which direction you would like to take it. I love that you can interrupt it mid-flow. Just wanted to chat about the implications of this. So you just told me that you needed a task management tool,
Yeah.
and then you went to the App Store. You looked at the App Store, you saw some options, and the options weren't even that expensive. And there's a part of you that is, of course, a tinkerer, but you said, hey, I'm going to go build something myself. What are the implications of that? You're a year ahead of the curve, 2 years ahead of the curve, but eventually everybody else is going to be there too. So, what does that mean for apps on the App Store?
So I see a vision of the App Store and the whole concept of applications changing. So the first thing to recognize is, what are Google building? What are OpenAI building? They're building operating systems. And I think some people get that, but it's really important to understand that. You look at ChatGPT now, ChatGPT Teams account, say, and that is 18 separate tools. It's more akin to Microsoft Office than it is an LLM. And so they're building these operating systems, and these operating systems can build code. And so imagine a phone, and the phone doesn't actually have any software on it at all. And there is no app store. I'm going to predict, I'm not going to think about what this means right now. But there is no app store. In fact, what there is a faster, cleaner version of what you're looking at right now. And so what that's then doing is it's allowing a user to go in and ask for an app, any app they want, and the phone will dynamically build the app in real time and then display the app. And so whatever it is that I want, in the same way that Netflix will just dynamically create a film, you'll be able to dynamically create an application. And that application can change in real time. And actually, the phone will really just be a data store of data used by those apps. And so that's one of the big ways I see this kind of technology changing. We will just ask our PCs, our Macs, our phones, our tablets for a piece of functionality, and they will create that functionality to our spec in real time.
There's so many implications of this, but it is really interesting. I love your framing around thinking about OpenAI and even Anthropic as like the new operating systems to a certain extent, right? So you are right. Like when I look at the ChatGPT interface today, for example, they've got Operator, they've got Sora, they've got now Kodak. So they've got various tools in there, and each one can perform a different function. Now they're distinct. You have to go there and, separately to get those things done. But in theory, like it's all part of the same operating system. And what I also liked is you said that the devices, like these phones that we kind of hold, like they're basically just data stores. And there's a hopeful part of me that thinks that Apple will eventually get into this game and do it well, and maybe take like a different approach, almost like a privacy first approach, where your data is used, it's on the device, and they have a way of kind of like obscuring that, in a sense that not all your information has to be sent to all the different platforms that you're using.
So I think that's a really powerful vision. And I agree with you on the there's a really interesting privacy element to that. The phone is where you store the data. And then on top of that, you have a layer of like dynamic applications that can just access that data. There's another really clever element with the way that large language models have gone, which is then when you want to transfer that data somewhere else, when you want to share with someone, when you want to interact with another person, what you then have on these devices is a built-in translation service. So I did a proof of concept like a year ago, and it was two APIs with two LLMs on the front of the APIs. And then I got the LLMs to talk to each other, and I got to transfer data across these two APIs. Those APIs weren't connected. The LLMs were shown, this is the API, and the LLMs were doing the work. They were going in, extracting, coming across. And you saw this conversation between them. I said, what I want you to do is synchronize the companies in your two systems. It was Salesforce and Apollo. Synchronize the companies in my account. It took about 15 minutes of backwards and forwards with very polite AIs saying, oh, hey there, I'm the Salesforce API. They had this conversation. They worked out what data they had. They found the companies that were similar. They merged them. They had the right to, actually the API could push data in. And I ended up with two completely synchronized databases.
That is insanely impressive. That is so cool that you did that.
Yeah, I can't believe no one's really been talking about it or done it yet. I mean, like commercially.
That should be a product. I know you're pretty busy, but that could be a very valuable product.
But you imagine that in the real world, there's no more integration. Now, all of a sudden, Android phones and Apple phones and new phones will all talk to each other because you've got these AIs, language models, understanding language, APIs. It's just, it's all just language. And so it is a really interesting world, because interoperability across devices could mean that you could have your own version of Facebook. Someone else could have their own version of Facebook. And yet you could come together, and Facebook, the platform, is just another data store. And all we're really doing is just pushing data. And the whole concept of the UI layer kind of goes away, which again is, you don't think necessarily right now about the implication. And, there have been a lot of shifts. Look at the industrial revolution, the digital revolution, etc. There's a lot of things have changed, but that's where I see this headed. I see this as being almost an AI on a chip within a device that is just dynamically building software. Imagine you own a website and you have an LLM like Claude Code on the inside of that website, and it has access to Google Analytics. It has access to all of the traffic and customer data and sales data. And in real time, it's rebuilding the website to optimize conversion. Like, that's the kind of thing I think you'll start to see.
It's a brave new world. It's interesting. A lot of the, on the dynamic interfaces, this seems to be the way that software is going as well. Like, before in software, you would typically have like templatized pages that would be filled, talk to a database, grab the data, put it in the template. But all the pages roughly look the same. Maybe the data was different. But now you can think about, just a lot of these things being dynamically created on the fly, depending on what the user is looking to do. And maybe your pages look different than my pages and they have no resemblance. And this is a very interesting world. This is exciting, though. Kind of like wrap up on this part. Everybody should go try out Claude Code. If you have a Claude account, you go to the website. We'll put it in the show notes, and also the newsletter. So again, if you haven't signed up, thisnewway.com, there's a newsletter. We're going to put Rob's tips and tricks in a tutorial like format, so you can just follow it. So make sure to do that. I guess, Rob, on to the final piece. So you had one more demo that you were going to show us, which was more like a deep research sort of function.
Yeah, so I'm going to talk through this one rather than show it, just because it's a 25-minute process. But I just want to explain, it's very simple. And meanwhile, one thing to say on Claude is I had an error at the last hurdle. You can screenshot the error and paste it into Claude, which I did. And now I have a beautiful working site where I can add employees and do all sorts. So it's looking really good. So it's a really simple process, but this is probably the most transformational workflow that I have come across. And so it's not a plug for Fellow, but I use Fellow. So this is using Fellow. It doesn't matter what service you're using, transcription service. But the concept here is really overloading the AI with context and then driving towards the result. And so I do a lot of discovery sessions with my clients. I also do a lot of discovery sessions with prospects. And I used to talk to them, write notes, write a proposal, or whatever it ends up being I'm trying to create. Then I moved to talking to them and transcribing, and then using that to kind of figure out what I was going to do next. And what I've started realizing now is the power of really large, purposeful context. So there are really 3 steps to this. The first is, and I'll give an example, a recent example. So recently I worked with an organization and did around 20 hours of discovery calls. That's a lot of discovery. When I'm doing the discovery calls, I know that I am not doing those calls for me. So I am doing those calls specifically for my AI workflow. And so the way I behave on those calls is very different. When we are looking at images on a screen, I will overtly describe the image and say, oh, so just, you're looking at that box that says XYZ and I see it's doing this. In fact, I'll try a lot of the time and avoid screen sharing, which again is completely counterintuitive, because normally you would be screen share. So I'll be doing a discovery call, try and avoid it, but if necessary, then I'll talk it through. And I won't say things like, I see you clicked that and moved it over there. I'll be like, oh, I see you clicked the icon in the top right that says so-and-so, and you moved it down to the bottom left that says so-and-so. So I'm purposefully narrating what's happening on this call. And I also the client will know I'm doing this, and I will also occasionally call out specifically the AI and say, so, my AI is called Sam after the film, which everyone should watch. And, I will say, oh, can I just for 1 second, just so I can let my assistant know what's happening for when she rewatches this back, Sam XYZ. So that's the first stage. So now I have 25 hours worth of transcripts focused in that way. I will take those out of Fellow, and it is a little bit of a plug, but it's probably some of the best transcription I've seen. I use the raw transcripts most of the time, and then I'll use the summaries almost as a way of just either adding them into the prompt, or if I just want something quick. But a lot of the time I'll use the raw transcripts. I put all of those into deep research. So I have several prompts that I've written in deep research that are specifically designed to do this workflow. I use Markdown for all my prompts. My prompts look like charts with, they're massive, and they will have tables, and they will have headers and bullet points and all that sort of stuff. So my prompt might be 4 or 5 pages just for the prompt. And then I will ask deep research to do something. So, for example, 25 hours in this specific example. And what we wanted out of that was a set of 3 different process maps, end-to-end process maps for this particular organization. And so then I set those 3 off in deep research, and I end up with a 12,000 word document that is a complete process map of that particular process I'm asking for. It might be a pitch. So I can set it off 25 minutes and I get a 5-page pitch for a client, etc. And then I will spend probably 30 minutes to an hour, depending on the size, going through proofing, highlighting, seeing what I like, what I don't like, all in Markdown. I use a really nice Markdown editor called Typora. So I'll highlight and all in Markdown. Then I'll feed that back in. Now that it's got the transcripts, it's got the document, and I'll ask for a set of changes. And then I'll usually proof that, and I'm there. And so what used to take me as a consultant about 4 to 5 days of effort, now I can condense down, and I actually have to spend probably an additional day's worth of calls, transcripts. The calls are a bit longer, and I have to pull all that information together. But I've got that down to 2 days. I'm talking about the creation of the document, because after 25 hours worth of calls, it takes you 4 days just to digest, get there, start typing up. I've got that down to 2 or 1 day now in terms of that delivery. And I have a workflow as well that will then create me, based on that document, a PowerPoint presentation. So it does me 3 bullets per slide and a suggested image prompt. And I will then feed the image prompt into now the beautiful GPT-1 image with ChatGPT, and it will create me my PowerPoint presentation. And so I've cut a week's work now down to probably a day if I really go for it. That's changed my life.
I'm gonna say that whole thing is mind blowing. There's so much in that, and it's just super interesting, right? Because you've actually made changes to your workflow. So you said that my calls are now longer and more detailed, and the way that I'm walking through them is different because they're not for me, they're for the AI. And this idea of, doing things not for you but for the AI is just like, it's an interesting concept. And then you have this like practical value that you've built, and out of that other things can flow. It's incredible. Like, you basically change your workflow. I think this is another important thing, in that one of my learnings is that you can't just do the same things you were doing and, get AI to speed you up by 10%. Like, that's doing it wrong. It's the changing your workflows and rethinking how you might do it if you have these powerful tools.
That is one of the top 3 things that I train out to people, is that one of the biggest mistakes that people make is that they just take their existing workflow and just try and put AI in. Humans have a tendency to work iteratively. And so we can build and build and build on something. AIs can't do that. They don't work well like that, because you're eating into context windows and they're getting distracted as they go. AIs like all the information up front and then to do the work and hone in, whereas we can kind of go the other way. And so once you recognize that you need to build a new AI workflow, then on one hand, it's an epiphany, it's great. On the other hand, it becomes more of a change process almost. But yeah, it's a big realization.
And so, Rob, we're getting close to time. So we're going to do something that we haven't done before, which is you said that this was one of the top 3 things. So there's the other top 2 things. But those final top 2 things we're going to put in the newsletter. So this new way to sign up, we're going to put the last 2 things in there as well that Rob has seen the most. But Rob, this has been incredible. Thank you so much for walking us through this. So again, you're one of my go-to people. Anytime I want to know what's the latest things that are working and the ROI that you're getting from AI. If people want to reach out to you, what's the best way that they can contact you? Maybe they have something in their company they want to improve. Maybe they want to get your thoughts on something. Yeah. How do people get in touch?
So happy for people just to reach out. I have LinkedIn is a great way for me personally. So I'm on LinkedIn. I think Rob Williams Canada, I think, is my LinkedIn profile, or just have a look for me. I have a crazy avatar on there, so I'm reasonably recognizable. Based in Ontario, in Canada, Stony Creek, so that will get you there as well. And the consultancy, my consultancy company, I'm Chief AI Officer. It's called Softhouse Advisory, and so I am rob.w@softhouseadvisory.com.
Rob, thanks so much for doing this. This was awesome.
No worries, pleasure.
And that's it for today. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of This New Way. If you like the content, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe so you can get notified when we post the next episode. See you next time.